Welcome back, survivalists. So we've now officially entered hurricane season here in the United States. So hurricane season runs from June 1st until November 30th. But if you've not gotten prepared yet and built your hurricane kit yet, you still have a little bit of time before we really hit peak hurricane season. This year, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is predicting an above normal hurricane season. So they're predicting that we're going to see 19 named storms, 10 hurricanes, and up to 6 major hurricanes this year. And a major hurricane just means that the hurricane has wind speeds of 111 miles per hour or higher. Now, when preparing for a hurricane, there are some unique challenges that you may not have with other natural disasters, and you want to plan accordingly. With a hurricane, the #1 leading cause of death is actually going to be the storm surge. Now, storm surge is the increased ocean water levels as a hurricane approaches landfall and is literally pushing the water inland. And if you live anywhere near the coast, this is something that you really need to be aware of, and you have to be constantly monitoring this and figuring out if you want to bunk in and kind of shelter in place, or if it's time that you pack up your hurricane kit and you bug out and you evacuate to higher ground. And this is partially why when you build your hurricane kit, you want to have like mobility in mind and either build it in like a large Tupperware container or maybe a large backpack, something that you could grab and go in case you do need to evacuate. Now, if you don't actually live near the coast, you still need to be concerned about inland flooding. So inland flooding occurs from the increased rainfall, which can sometimes last several days, that occurs when you have a major hurricane make landfall. And inland flooding is actually the second leading cause of hurricane-related deaths. You also need to be prepared for destructive winds, which can literally blow roofs off homes and send trees and other large debris flying through your windows. Just last year, Hurricane Dorian saw wind speeds as high as 185 miles per hour. And these high wind speeds can also spawn off tornadoes, which can cause even more destruction. And of course, the days after a hurricane can be just as critical and life-threatening as the day the hurricane actually makes landfall. It's not uncommon to see entire communities go without power for several days or even several weeks after a hurricane strikes. It's also not uncommon to see roads become completely impassable or completely erode away due to the hurricane. And this can obviously make it much harder to restore power to communities, or to make it almost impossible for you to be able to be reached by emergency responders. You also really have to worry about entire communities' water supplies being contaminated from inland flooding or from the actual storm surge. The days after a hurricane, you're also going to see an increased health risk from mold, bacteria, and viruses due to the destruction of a hurricane. In 2017, after Hurricane Harvey made landfall and we saw massive flooding in Texas and all along the Gulf Coast, I personally flew down to Houston, Texas to help homeowners in that recovery effort. Many of the homes in Houston, Texas saw floodwater entering their home as high as 6 feet. And after that water finally started receding, all of the drywall, the carpet, and all of their furniture immediately started growing mold on it. So part of my efforts down there was to help homeowners remove all that drywall, carpet, and furniture before the mold completely took over their homes, and we essentially stripped their first floors of their homes down to the studs. And I was completely blown away by how many homeowners were still living in their houses days after the flooding while everything around them is rotting and decaying and starting to grow mold. You know, this obviously poses tremendous health risk, especially to your respiratory system. So when preparing for hurricane season, you want to keep all these specific challenges and threats in mind when you're stocking up on supplies and plan accordingly. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the hurricane preparation guide put out by FEMA. And inside this guide, they have 8 categories of items that they recommend that all Americans buy in preparation for a major hurricane. So I'll be breaking down each of these 8 categories of items and giving you guys specific examples and my thoughts on them. And at the end of the video, I'll give you my personal recommendations for some additional items that I think you should include in your hurricane kit that FEMA doesn't have on their list. So the first category of item that they recommend is going to be tools and safety items. And one of the obvious ones in this category is going to be flashlights. Now, when you're buying flashlights, there's really 2 categories of flashlights. You can get a directional flashlight like this, which is what we're all pretty used to. But what I actually recommend is that you buy an omnidirectional flashlight like this, or otherwise known as a lantern. So something like this is going to be far more useful in a power outage situation. If you think about a flashlight, if you're trying to prepare food or use the bathroom or really do anything, it gets pretty tricky if you have to hold a flashlight or lay it down on a counter. An omnidirectional lantern like this is going to help you free up your hands so that you can actually prepare food or use the bathroom or anything like that. And you only need maybe 1 or 2 of these to illuminate an entire room. So your entire family can have light just from one large lantern like this. So you absolutely can buy some flashlights, and they're pretty inexpensive, but I do definitely recommend that you include some larger battery-powered lanterns like this in your kit as well. They also recommend including some sort of multi-purpose tool like a Leatherman or a Swiss Army knife. And I definitely agree with this. You never really know exactly what situation is going to arise, and having kind of a general tool like that will really help you out in most situations. So they also recommend matches or lighters in a waterproof container. And if you do that, I would go ahead and go with the waterproof matches. This is going to help you out, especially in a possible flooding situation. So I'll be honest, lately I've actually been moving towards fireless emergency kits. You know, personally, I now have small children in my house, and I don't really like the idea of having multiple candles throughout the house and having a propane burner in my living room. So I've actually been moving towards battery-powered light sources and food supplies that don't require cooking or any sort of fire, just for the kind of short-term power outage situations. So if you have a lot of kids in your house, you may want to consider doing the same. They also recommend that you have some sort of emergency whistle in your hurricane kit. And I agree with this. When you're dealing with a hurricane and potential for high water flooding, like I said in Houston, Texas, they saw floodwater as high as 6 feet in some of these homes. As emergency responders are trying to help homeowners evacuate their homes, or they're looking for survivors, having an emergency whistle to help them locate you, it could be the difference between life and death. So the next category of items in their list is going to be emergency communication. And one of the first things they recommend is that you put all your emergency contacts on an actual piece of paper and include that in your kit. And the idea behind this is, what if your battery dies or your phone gets wet? You're still going to have a physical copy of all the contact information of maybe your family members who you may need to evacuate to their home, or maybe your medical professional that knows your medical history already. They also recommend including cell phone chargers in your kit and having some sort of battery backup. So something like this you can get pretty inexpensively, and I charge this ahead of time when I know there's a storm coming, and I can actually get 3 full charges of my cell phone just on this little battery backup, and these are pretty inexpensive today. You can get a decent one anywhere from $20 to $40. They also recommend that you have an emergency radio, which gets the NOAA weather channel. And I definitely agree with this. This is actually one of the first items I tell people to buy when they're first starting off and getting into prepping. Having that access to the latest news or weather updates when you don't have any power is going to be critical. And something like this will give you that constant news update, and it may also give you a morale boost just by listening to the radio. This also has an emergency flashlight built into it, and it even has a USB port in the back here, so you could charge your cell phone off of this. Now this particular one has a rechargeable battery, which you can charge using the crank on the side here, or you can leave it out in the daytime and that rechargeable battery will charge from these solar panels on top. So if you don't have an emergency radio like this yet, this is definitely gonna be one of the first items that you wanna buy for your emergency kit. You usually get something like this between $30 and $40 on Amazon. This particular one is made by Oregon Scientific, and I'll have a link to this radio as well as a lot of the other recommended items that I talk about in this video down in the description below. So the next category of items is going to be water and food supplies. Now FEMA is recommending that you have at least 3 days of non-perishable food supplies for each member in your family. They also recommend that you have 1 gallon of water per person per day for up to 3 days. So if you have 5 members in your family, that means they're recommending that you have 15 gallons of water just like this stored away just for emergencies. And this water is not just used for hydration, but as well as cooking and sanitation. And you can buy a gallon of water like that for less than $1 at most grocery stores. Now when you're buying food supplies for your home, there's a couple different options that you can go with this. One of the easiest and obvious ones is just buy additional food that you and your family typically eat, and just make sure that you have several extra days worth of food kind of stored away in your pantry. Another option is that you can buy some prepackaged and sealed dried food. So something like this is chicken and gravy, and all you need to do is just add some hot water, mix it up, and then you and your family can have a hot meal, even if you don't have any power in your home. Now these are a little bit more expensive. You can get something like this for $5 or $6 just for one meal. And then another option is you could buy a bucket of food like this. So this one here has 60 servings of those freeze-dried packaged meals, and they do have some variety in the bucket. Something like this will last you up to 25 years, and honestly the food in here probably would last a good bit longer than that. And all you need to do is just add some hot water to these freeze-dried meals, and then you and your family are gonna have some halfway decent food no matter what the situation is. I personally keep 3 of those buckets in my home at all time, just in case of some sort of disaster like a major hurricane. I just kind of stick them under my stairs and I don't really think about them, but they give me the peace of mind knowing that I've checked that box on my emergency kit and that my family and I will have plenty of food no matter what the situation is. FEMA also includes infant formulas and diapers in their kit as well. If that's applicable to you, then yeah, you definitely want to have extra baby supplies in your disaster kit just in case. And if you have any pets, you definitely want to include some additional pet food and other supplies in your emergency kit as well. So the next category of items is going to be hygiene and sanitation. And this is definitely pretty important, especially if you did experience any sort of flooding in your home, or if you and your family have to go several days or even weeks without any power in your home. So FEMA recommends that you have some soap, disinfectant, and sanitizers in your hurricane kit. And I recommend that you just go out and buy a pack of hand sanitizer like this. Again, if you did experience some flooding, you're gonna find things like dead fish and animals outside of your house. If you did have flooding indoors, you're gonna have potential mold in there, and staying clean and sanitized is going to be critical, right? You almost always see a huge spike in different diseases and infections immediately after a major flood or hurricane. They also recommend keeping paper towels and moist towelettes in your kit, as well as additional toilet paper. They are also recommending a gallon of bleach in your kit as well. You can use this as a disinfectant, and you can also use this to sanitize water if you needed to. You also want to include oral hygiene in that as well, and buy some additional toothbrushes and toothpaste just in case something happens to your typical toothbrush and toothpaste. So the next category of item is going to be protective gear and clothing. So they recommend that you have additional clothes for everybody in your family, preferably something warm, so some jackets or some fleeces for everybody in your family. You want to make sure everybody has some sturdy boots as well. If you've ever seen any of the aftermath after a hurricane, there's usually just a tremendous amount of debris all around your home, so you don't want to be walking around in that stuff with some flip-flops or sandals on, so make sure you have some sturdy boots. They also include blankets or sleeping bags in their kit. So let's say worst case scenario, your bottom floor floods and everybody now needs to sleep upstairs or even in the attic. You want to make sure that you have blankets and sleeping bags for everybody so they can actually try to get some sleep during the hurricane. They don't have this in their list, but I would personally also throw some work gloves in that kit as well. Again, there's usually a lot of debris outdoors after a major hurricane, and you want to be able to handle those objects without cutting up your hands or worrying about rusty nails or anything. So the next category of items is going to be medical needs. So if you are on any kind of really important medication, make sure you have enough supplies. Try to have 2-3 weeks worth of supplies if you can. Just kind of in worst case scenario, you can't access the pharmacy or the hospital to get more medication. Make sure that you have a few weeks worth of supplies before hurricane season or before a specific hurricane strikes you. If you wear glasses, try to have an extra pair of glasses in your hurricane kit as well, just in case. The next item that they recommend is having a first aid kit inside your hurricane kit. And this is pretty important, one of the first items that you should buy, especially with a hurricane where there is going to be that increased wind speed. There's going to be a lot of debris flying outdoors and maybe even shattering windows. So there is a chance that you may get some sort of laceration from that debris or broken glass. And if you then have to go several days without clean water or out power, there's just an increased likelihood that those cuts and lacerations may become infected. So make sure you have a first aid kit so that you can close up those wounds and protect them from getting infected. I'm going to throw another item in this category, and that's going to be anti-diarrhea medication. So just in case you do eat some contaminated food or drink some not very clean water, you know, diarrhea is going to be one of those very first symptoms of food poisoning. So you make sure you have some anti-diarrhea medicine in your first aid kit or in your hurricane kit. The next category of items is going to be critical documents. So you want to have photocopies of your personal IDs, as well as personal records such as birth certificates or marriage certificates, and even your medical records. Try to have copies of those in your hurricane kit, just in case those originals somehow get lost or damaged. You also want to have copies of your financial documents as well. So maybe your bank statements or 401k statements, as well as copies of your property records. So maybe copies of your deed or your insurance company. And of course, you want to have cash in your hurricane kit as well. If the power goes down in your community for, let's say, a week, but you need to get access to some food for your family or maybe some gas for your vehicle, and they can't process credit cards anymore, they're only going to be doing cash transactions. And all of these critical documents, you want to keep them all in some sort of waterproof and portable container, so that if you do need to evacuate your home, you can just grab this one box and you can just leave with it, and you have everything that you need already in this container. This one here is actually fireproof as well, so if my home ever did burn down, all those critical documents as well as my cash is going to be protected. It's also recommended that you include items in there to keep you and your family occupied. So maybe some books, maybe a deck of cards, maybe some puzzles or board games. You and your family may have to be locked in that home and go without power for several days. So you want to be prepared for that and have something to kind of keep you occupied. So there are some additional items that I personally recommend that you also include in your hurricane kit that FEMA did not have on their list. And one of those items is going to be a way of purifying and filtering water. You very well may not have access to clean drinking water for several days or weeks after a major hurricane. So one of the simplest water filters would be something like this. So this is made by Katadyn, and it's a thermos, but inside of it, it has a very powerful water filter. So you can fill this up with contaminated water, and then when you drink out of it, you're sucking it through that filter, which is going to purify that water. And you can get something like this fairly cheap on Amazon, maybe $30, $40. There's also something known as a life straw, which is very similar to this except without the container, and essentially you're just sucking water through a powerful charcoal filter like that. So that's a very affordable option right there. And another option if you have a larger family is you can get something like this, which is a portable water filter. This one here is from Survivor Filter. And with this, you stick the hose in one source of dirty water, and you stick the end of this hose in a clean container, and you literally just pump the water through the filter here. But something like this could provide you and your family with clean drinking water in the worst case scenario. And I'll have links to both of these water filters down in the description below. So the next category of items will really come in handy if you need to go without power for several days or weeks, and that is solar powered flashlights. So this one here is made by Hybrid Light and actually has two different batteries in it. One of them is replaceable and the other one is rechargeable. And rechargeable one charges from this solar panel built right into the handle of the flashlight. So if you had to go a long time without power, all you need to do is leave this out in the daytime to charge it, and then at nighttime you'll have enough juice in here to provide light for you and your family. So this is an example of a directional solar powered flashlight, and this is an example of an omnidirectional solar powered flashlight. So this one is by Luminade, and it has a large solar panel here on the top, and is actually inflatable. And all that inflation does is really just diffuse the light. So again, this is more of a solar powered lantern, and it can illuminate an entire room. It also has an emergency beacon feature on it where it will flash a light. So if you are trapped in your attic because of flooding, you can let this charge in the daytime, and then in the evening time, it'll start flashing maybe in your window to signal that you may need some help. So again, this one's made by Luminade, and I highly recommend that you guys look into this company. It's a very cool company. And this one here, the directional solar powered light, is made by Hybrid Light. So the kit that we built today is specifically for hurricanes, but if you want to know what's inside a more general kit that will help you out in case of an earthquake or a blackout or a tornado, click right here to check out my breakdown of the FEMA disaster kit. Don't forget to subscribe for more prepping and survival videos, and remember, I'll have links down in the description below to all the items that I mentioned in today's video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys over in the next video.